pass it over to Fiona now, who is here somewhere. And she's gonna, there we are. And she's gonna give us a talk. We got a little preview of it last night. So she's gonna continue now.
I totally forgot to take my washing off my line. That's so un-Irish.
That's okay, I have Post-it notes. You have washing, I have Post-it notes.
Yeah. Great. I think that I'm hoping that my presentation is going to continue really smoothly. I didn't catch all of Larry's presentation, but it seemed to touch on a lot of pertinent topics that I'm specifically going to focus on the agri-food sector in agriculture. I do have a slide deck, and I'm hoping that I'm going to share my screen pretty simply.
If not, I have it. We have so many backups.
Oh, super. Okay, let me just try this.
Awesome.
Yeah?
Perfect.
Good?
Yep.
Great. Okay. My company is called Argent Chain Networks, and we specifically look at enhancing transparency in the food supply chain. We identified a gap in the information that was available to the wider supply chain, being at the very, very beginning of the food supply. So that on farm and the bit before the product reaches either a processor or a supermarket. So both of those sides will be very, I guess, the food industry. And that's where product would be tagged typically by something like a GS1 barcode, a GTIN, something like that. But that doesn't usually happen on the farm. And we wanted to see if we could help solve that problem. So this is what I'm going to talk about today, so that you know. I'm going to scoot through the bits that I think are the most important, and you can either hang out and hear the rest, or go and get busy with your work, because I know what it's like being in a hackathon, and it can be pretty intense. So I've got a couple of slides on the Irish agri-food context. Then I'm going to remind ourselves what's blockchain or DLT being either decentralized or distributed ledger technology, and how that particularly fits in with complex supply chains like the food supply chain. And I go into a little more detail. So using the chat function, if anybody wants to stop and ask questions along the way, please feel free. You know, this is meant to be useful for you, you know. So feel free to ask any questions. I've tried to include a couple of useful links and resources that you might be able to use for your work. Not too many, they might be a bit in depth, but have a quick scoot through and see if there's anything useful there for you. Okay, the Irish agri-food sector. There are about 140,000 registered farms, registered or licensed. You need to be licensed to care for animals, which would be, you know, beef, sheep, poultry, and also dairy. There are about 2% of that is registered as organic. I know we were talking earlier on with Saoirse about organic and local produce. So we work quite a bit with the artisan food community and the organic sector. And we would try to promote the idea of creating a digital provenance record for the amount of work that they do in creating their food and their food chain. So here's a couple of links. Really, really important, and probably a bit boring to some people, is the European Green Deal. This is really important for farming, and it is all tied in with climate change and this ambition to make the whole of Europe a carbon neutral continent. So it's kind of interesting, and it has step-by-step, well, you can call them methods and you can call them requirements. And it sort of points towards the increasing regulation of the sector, not just farming, but industry, basically, in Europe, and what that's going to mean. So there's some interesting resources, statistics, and you'll get an insight into the policy and regulatory future that we're going into. Then there's the Digital Agriculture technology adoption and attitude study that's specifically about Irish farmers. And I've got a slide next that's just a couple of headliners, but it's not very long, it's very well presented, and you'll get an insight into the digital capacity amongst the farming community in Ireland, which probably has a higher age profile and probably less digital skills than maybe some other countries. The Irish agriculture sector is not, as Caitlin already pointed out earlier on today, it's, you know, we don't have massive farms, and consequently ag tech or agri-tech is not massively adopted here. It's not that there's not technology on farms, but there's definitely an issue around confidence and things like that. And I also included here a fact sheet on Irish agriculture, and this comes from the Department of Agriculture. It's from a couple of years ago, but it gives a kind of business context to the scene. In my experience, and I would like to say this, and I think this would tie in very much at what we saw from Saoirse earlier on, our farmers here are really entrepreneurial. I would say that is a common feature of many farmers. Farming is conducted in a highly disruptive environment. It is very weather dependent. They are usually price takers, and the parameters and the situation can change from year to year. So it is highly disruptive. And that is a reality, and that creates an environment where many of the, what we would consider in business, trying to reach out to that community, many of the early adopters are massively open to anything that is useful for them on the farm, and they will make very quick decisions about whether or not it's relevant to them. So it's a kind of really interesting environment to engage with. Okay, so some technology stuff. So I'm going to leave the stats out of it for now. You can dip into that if you want to. Technology confidence, about 50% of farmers surveyed said they feel confident in using technology, and about the other half don't, obviously, and 84% of all farmers use a smartphone. So that's why we focus on mobile devices for some of our products at the moment. Technology usage, you can have a look at that either in the slides or you can go to the report. So sustainability in Irish agri-produce. So this is very much linked in with the European regulation. So Irish food regulations come from Europe. And we have organic certification, we have the Board BIA QA accreditation scheme. So when you see your food, you can see over here on the right, the quality assurance sign. That's about Irish food, guaranteeing that food comes from Ireland and basically, well, it meets Irish food regulation requirements, but those are really derived from Europe. So our food safety, we're very privileged to live in Europe, where there's a really high degree of food safety, not just in Ireland, but throughout. And that's a common theme in the discussions about Brexit and what's going to happen over there. I'm not going to comment on what they will do with their food supply chain. But typically, I think people would imagine that it'll be a race to the bottom, or people fear it'll be a race to the bottom, whatever that might look like. In Ireland, we also have this thing called Argent Green. So it's a bit like a commercial organization that farmers who meet certain sustainability criteria, which are derived from the UN SDG goals, can get a sort of a membership or certificate saying that they comply with these ideals, I suppose you could call them, the sustainability goals. I think we would say in research terms, they're not very well measured. That would be one thing. So unlike the accreditation schemes, which are highly audited, and the incentive there to keep your documentation up to date and all that kind of thing, you won't get paid. You won't get your cap payment if you do not meet your documentation requirements. So that would be the Board BIA quality assurance schemes. Argent Green, there's nothing to lose. It's largely marketing, I would say. So let's remind ourselves, what is a blockchain? What is DLT? I know we've heard it tons of times. I always say it's like cryptographers have imagined a permanent, immutable, and shared data structure that can be used as a foundational technology. It introduces a new trust layer in virtual business relations and causes a disintermediation effect. This is very well characterized, and Juarez mentioned this earlier on, in that collective oversight and shared ownership, which fits quite neatly with the economic models that are very prevalent in farming, like cooperative farming models, cooperative financing. So there's a lot of opportunity there if we can find the right way of connecting to that business model in a meaningful way. So you can, actually I prepared the slides a couple of years ago when it was a bit more hectic in the blockchain space, so you can revolutionize whatever you want with the blockchain, or you can stagnate whatever you want with the blockchain either, to be honest. I included a link down here. So for anybody who is building a business and would like to share some, feature some shareable content, Ian Cahn's Future in 60 Minutes, I don't know how many people are aware of that. He's a kind of finance guy, I would say, based in New York, I think. And he's interviewing, this was streamed yesterday, it's about an hour long, everything to do with blockchain. Some people will find it a bit basic, but it talks about a lot of different sectors, from shipping to food to pharmaceuticals, to loads and loads of different types of applications. I think for people who don't really know about not just blockchain, but technology or AI or any of that kind of stuff, they tend to talk about the future with a blockchain as if it's like a digital butler. You're going to run out of milk and it's somehow going to appear from a drone and it's all going to be perfect and you'll never have to do anything again. So they talk about that a little bit, and what the background of that would be: information security, permissions, authorities, all that kind of thing. So it's actually it's interesting discussion. And Roman Beck is he is involved in standards development. He is the convener of the governance working group in the ISO TC 307, and he is also the head of the governance section of that white paper I referenced earlier on in the chat, which is for the UN CFACT report on cross-border blockchain interoperability. So I really do feel Matin's pain. There are not many interoperability solutions at the moment. It's a really hot topic in blockchain. You can, of course, exit your information from one blockchain and then send it or write it to another blockchain, as if you were going to a payment gateway or something like that. People can do things like that, but that all depends on how you're setting up your system and how you want systems to talk to each other. I mean, Tendermint is another one. They're what's it called, Atom, something like that. Tendermint has a pretty interesting approach to interoperability, but it all depends on users. And so they have Tendermint, Ethermint, cross-chain portability. I've never actually used their service, so it's not a high recommendation, but they've definitely tackled this issue of interoperability. Okay, let's move on. For the farming community, blockchain is part of a big digital transformation initiative. That's where it is. It's, it would be enhancing things like communication and the cooperation, and then, facilitating evidence-based decision-making, looking at real-time or near to real-time data from the field would massively influence decision-taking on a farm. I think there's a guy I follow on LinkedIn called John Kyo, and I noticed he had a post earlier on which says that using a blockchain is like looking in your rearview mirror in your car. It looks at what's already happened. So if you want to utilize your system in a way that is going to predict something, you need to connect it in a sensible way to some kind of artificial intelligence or data analytics process that is centered around flagging, predicting, he calls it short-circuiting. He's very much talking about systems management. So if you find him on LinkedIn, his recent post today is very interesting, and he shares. He wrote something for a food magazine, I think. I'll see if I can find the link, and I can share it on the Discord channel for anybody who's interested. I know we've had a couple of conversations already about this idea of UIDs, compliance info, IoT sensor feeds, permissioned access, and all that kind of stuff. So for the farming community, what it means is digital transformation and upskilling and enhancing processes. And I think to the farming community, they wouldn't care if there was a blockchain there or not. They just want to improve the way that they do things. So if we're looking at, talked a little about the farmers, talked a little bit about digitalization in the sector. We're talking about here, we're having a look at a single product, what appears down in the left-hand corner, what they are required to show on a package, which is, the name and all the ingredients. And if there's allergen, any allergic ingredients in the product, it has to be, certainly in Europe, it has to be said on the packaging, and all that other information is available on the packet or on the package or on the label. And then just above that, if we go clockwise, so this is a real product and a real farmer that we were working with, and we were modeling what he had on his farm. He had a tillage farm, and he produced rapeseed oil, and he produces organic oats. And he also, he kept bees, and in order to feed his bees, he had a heritage orchard. So we tracked some of the information and the source of it and what would be interesting to the consumer. And a lot of the information wouldn't really be available to a supply chain in a sort of transparency initiative, because it would be irrelevant or wouldn't be captured, or would have been captured the year that they got the grant to plant the heritage apples. It would have appeared then, but it wouldn't be current. So we were just mapping out the information that was, I guess, of interest from the consumer point of view, was really important from his point of view as a farmer with his own brand and his own product, and he wanted to communicate this value to the consumer. And it's really hard to fit it all on a label, right? So the solution is a kind of digital solution. And that ties in, I think, with the regulatory requirements, that there are going to be now greater requirements for in-depth traceability, particularly about our food. And there isn't enough real estate space on labels and packages. So we're absolutely looking at digital solutions and looking at whether it's QR codes or barcodes or digital links or RFID tags or whatever it's going to be. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff happening in new types of packaging and new types of ways of identifying products. There's kind of sprays that can be sprayed on things, and the spray itself can be scanned, and it's sort of like CSI or something like that. But it's really interesting developments, This is another way of looking at a product. I know some of you will have seen this yesterday. Paul sometimes uses this slide. So the heritage apple and baby oat porridge is a hypothetical product that was inspired by my work with Glasson Farm, because he had his heritage apples and he had his organic oats, and what this would mean. So this, if we look at the source, this would be one actor. The producer will be another actor. So the source would be where they got the product or the seed for the oats before it's planted. Your producer would be the farmer. The processor would be, in his instance, he doesn't mill his oats. They go to the Merry Mill somewhere else, and then he brings them back again. So there's like a side step in his chain. He brings it back and he packages it, and then he transports it to where it's retailed. But in this instance, the processor would be somebody else. And then logistically, he might be shipping it, wherever. A lot of baby food created in Ireland is shipped abroad, particularly milk product stuff. So I just tagged in some of the standards or some of the regulations here that would be relevant, because in as much as there's the sort of product or marketing information, there's also the auditable regulatory information that is part of the history and the story. And increasingly, there's a push from Europe to record that. But I think there's a demand amongst the consumer to have insight into that as well, because I think people are growing more concerned about the integrity of the food that they buy. And we're lucky at the moment in Europe, food security is not so much of an issue, but in other jurisdictions, food security certainly is a concern. And if Irish farmers are exporting to those other jurisdictions, it de facto becomes their concern as well. So it's something to think about if you are exporting, particularly to like Asia, the Middle East, China, because Irish produce would be considered premium product there, and it would be whether it's beef or baby powder, it would be a kind of a luxury or really premium item in those jurisdictions, and the consumers for those products or that produce would be expecting the same degree of transparency into their food that they have at home. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with supply chain transparency stuff in China, but in China it's really common for people to be able to scan something and see the whole history of a product from wherever it's come to their doorstep. I mean, most shopping, it seems to be done, online and to your door. So that's the context in which an Irish exporter would be operating. Okay, so the little pink thing down at the bottom is some of the consumer interest categories. So organic, artisan, sustainable. Sustainable isn't even all food because of the Sustainable Green Deal. All food will have to be considered sustainable. So, and then other premium categories look at halal, kosher. There could be fair trade, we would say. There's vegan. There's a lot of different kind of additional certifications that you can get that will make your product identifiable to your specific market that may have particular needs. So I can talk about this a little bit, but if you want me to move on, I could do that either. I don't know if anyone has any questions right now.
No, I say we have about 10 minutes left, so up to you if you want to plow ahead or take some questions. I'll also drop this drop the PDF into the what's called Discord. There we go.
Okay.
As well.
So this, I'll just tell you what it is, and anyone who's interested can skip back to it. So these are some of the current threats, I would say, to systems that are using blockchains. The tying together of the actual entity in the real world with their digital identity, and because you can track and scan a label, but can you remove it from the package or the item? I know sometimes you can, like strawberries, you can put them in a punnet, and the punnet itself is trackable and is the ID, and it can be reused, but that adds value to that punnet then, and that becomes a security risk. If it's, Carrefour, for example, have tried this and they just found that it wasn't worth it because either the punnets were getting lost or they were kind of being resold or repurposed. I don't know if they solved that problem. Data integrity, incentivizing farm to fork, incentivizing good data integrity. It's like a human factors issue probably. Digital resources for farmers, particularly in Ireland. I'm going to be really boring and just say broadband sucks here. 5G is a viable option. The whole availability, reliability of software systems or cloud systems is really, really important. And thinking about an edge computing approach would be definitely advisable, I would suggest. And then the whole fact about blockchains being immutable is the core feature, or a core feature, but it's also a risk when you consider GDPR. If the wrong kind of data is put on it, or personal data. In Europe, you have a thing called the right to be forgotten. There are some amazing solutions to all of that. Self-sovereign identity, different kind of data ownership models and that, but there's a bit of thinking to do about that. So it's sort of interesting area. And then quantum computing, hands in the air. Whoa, I'm not a quantum physicist, so I can't go into that too much, but it is one of the recognized threats, and the real threat there, or the most immediate threat, which they consider to be really like a viable thing in about 10 to 15 years, will be the security of private and public key infrastructure, which will impact all of us in our everyday usage of the internet. So DLT and food integrity, this ties into the Green Deal stuff. Organic and consumer food categories, they're just listed out there. And then I was going to talk a little bit about this mobile farm compliance app, but you've got your own ideas to be working on, so I don't want to distract you with this. So this is just a UML model. I know I mentioned it yesterday. It's a use case diagram. The square shape is inside the system. The little stick people are the users. And it's what they would use the system for, the purpose and the role that they would have. And this is an analysis based on the ISO TC 307 reference architecture for blockchains. That's not yet a technical standard to be adopted, but it's published, or will shortly be published, as a technical standard for consideration. So it's basically an exploded view of your blockchain system from the point of view of the first node. So you can see DLT node A here, which is attached to the public network in the same way as node B, node C, node D. And node A will have user system and admin system. There might be non-DLT systems, which some of you will understand what an oracle is, or a source of information that is going to be supplied to the blockchain. So often that's coming from another system. It could be an ERP system, could be from the Department of Agriculture. In this instance, Department of Agriculture, or it could be a logistics company, or it could be whatever. So that will be data held off chain, and you are going to use it to form the body of something that's written in a transaction that has value within the system that you are designing. And then there's a little spot there for any other DLT system. So that's not classically regarded as an interoperable system. It would be considered a hybrid system. So in this proposal, there's open source Hyperledger Indy using an SSI, self-sovereign identity model, for the onboarding and KYC of the actors in using the system. So if we're thinking about something like universal farm compliance, the farmer wants to be reassured that nobody's messing with his compliance details. And also the compliance bodies want to know who of their staff is interfacing with the system, who's making decisions, who's certifying compliance at the appropriate stage. So all of that would need to be tracked and ordered, let's say. So that's a proposal we have here. And this is actually a kind of an award-winning use case that Sensenelec adopted this. It's one of, this project is one of 9 shortlisted for an Innovation and Standards Award, with the winners will be announced later on in the year. So this is highly regarded, largely probably because it uses the European Blockchain Partnership infrastructure, and Hyperledger is obviously the private part, and Ethereum Besu is a client that writes to the public Ethereum blockchain. So this is what would be considered hybrid, and some people, probably I do a bit as well, think that this is a sort of a patch, or a patch approach in the face of no real interoperability between blockchains. So something like this at the moment is probably a stepping stone if we get to true interoperability at a later stage. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. No, that was really great. So sure, Martin, you want to ask?
One question. I will have one question on the last slide.
On the last slide.
So this operability across the public and permission blockchain. Ethereum is a public one, then the other one, Hyperledger, is permissioned. And so which part of the system was used for public blockchain? Which parameters we should decide? Okay, we should look at to decide whether this part should be on the public network and this one should be on the permission network.
So that is, when you're designing any kind of a system, those are the decisions you make, right? You design your system for the requirements that you have. In this instance, if we leave out the Hyperledger Indy part for a second, what this system does is create and use a private permission blockchain as a blockchain-enabled workflow engine for participating organizations. And an organization will also include a farm, right? So that is a closed private communication between the regulated compliance authorities and the farming actors within the system. Now, once the compliance is achieved, audited and achieved and certified, you can see here at the top, you see D, user systems.
Yeah.
Top right-hand corner. So there's user systems, there's a workflow engine, there's a report, audit, and compliance certification. So the ongoing day-to-day business, kind of real-time data updates from the farm are recorded using the private workflow engine on Hyperledger Fabric. And these then are at a certain point when their compliance is achieved through these defined sets of workflows, which are published by the distinct compliance authorities. Once that is achieved, that achievement is certified and published to the public blockchain.
Right. Okay. So yeah, we could also use the Hyperledger Burrow, which is the wrapper over Ethereum. That can also Hyperledger.
The reason I use this is because I am part of a campaign to try to get the Irish government to apply for and adopt the European Blockchain Partnership infrastructure services. So I could have used anything here. I don't need.
Yeah. No. I'm not questioning, but yeah, that can be a solution, right?
Yeah.
So it's really helpful for us. Can we also gather the data of the fertilizers or some other chemicals being used onto the agriculture?
All of that information, Martin, all of that information has to be provided to the Department of Agriculture as part of the regular farm auditing process. There is a carbon calculation that farmers must provide at the beginning of the year to say, this is what my carbon footprint in my farm is going to be this year. And if it breaches there's a little algorithm, or there's a calculation that is worked out, but depending on the type of farm you have and how many heads of cattle and whether they are milking, whether they're pregnant cows or calves or bulls or whatever size the beast is, that you get a different type of allowance. And if for some reason you think you're going to breach it, you must apply for a derogation in advance. And at the end of the year, you have to write a report that proves that you kept to your predicted carbon usage. So this is just one strand. This will what we would call its one workflow. So that is already part of the farming compliance requirements. And if they do not comply, they will be fined, and they will also run the risk of not getting their CAP payments, which is the farmers' payment through, farmers are basically paid through Europe. Not in the market, you know, they don't, it's not like one of those fairy stories, you know, the beanstalk and the beans, and you go to the market and that's what you make. Actually, you're paid in, and you're licensed to farm in accordance with European guidelines. And if you farm your product and report your farming in the correct way, you will get paid from Europe for being that type of farmer. And then you also get your product, right?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah,
Hold on one second, Martine. Sorry, just because we're a little bit over time. If anybody has more questions, you've been wonderfully active on the Discord this whole weekend. They can ping you, Fiona D. She's easy to find. I will also drop all of the PDF here. I have the updated one into the
with one extra link.
One more link.
No, I will take this presentation because I'll have to have some more pondering on this because I'm doing something on this area. So I may have some questions later on. I'll email her.
Yeah, perfect. Sure. And Fiona's also on LinkedIn. Fiona Delaney, easy to find as well. So she's all over the place. And I'll also drop this once the video is processed. I'll put it up on YouTube as I've done with all the other ones. So for the people on Teams now, or on their teams who have been dropped in, this is your validation time. You have a big 2 hour chunk of time to go out and find if people actually want your solution. Kind of like what Laurie mentioned in there, that even if you have the greatest solution in the world, if people aren't going to pay for it, it's probably not going to get very far. So this is your time to ask people. You should have that idea of who your user is, who your customer is. Try and find those people. I also recommend, my marketing background showing through, use Google Trends. Find out if people are asking the void about how to solve this problem. There are lots of resources out there. Go on, what are they called, discussion boards. There are discussion boards about all of the topics that you guys are looking at. So they're out there. There are people out there who are asking these questions and who would be willing and always are happy to talk to people. You have 2 hours until your mentor meetings. You'll have them at 4:30. I will be dropping the mentors into your chats, into your group chats, and giving you guys a little bit more information before then. So 2 hours to work, mentor meetings after that. Any questions, drop them in the Discord. And thank you again, Fiona, so much. That was so, bye everybody.